Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our session on securing finance for small-scale fisheries. We want to thank the TBTI leadership for creating this wonderful platform where stakeholders from all over the world have been able to share their own stories about their work in transforming small-scale fisheries. And my name is Mara Hart. I'm the Director of Discovery at Future of Fish, and I'm joined today by my colleague Lara Fernandez-Cascan and Francis Lanzone. Laura is our Director of Business Innovation and Blended Finance, and she will be helping to walk me through some preliminary findings that we have at Future of Fish to address this enormous challenge that we think is holding back successful fisheries transformation towards more economically viable, equitable, and environmentally sustainable states. And that obstacle is unlocking finance. And so today we are going to be having a discussion at a very high level for those who are not familiar with finance to try to understand better what are some of the real challenges that we need to overcome, and to present to you some preliminary findings from work that Future of Fish has been doing over the past 2 years to explore this challenge and come up with some strategies that we think will be helpful for practitioners. And in particular, we've developed a framework, which really is a sort of checklist that can help guide practitioners in thinking about all the different components that need to be considered when trying to develop not only a transformation strategy, but a finance strategy to accompany it. And I want to preface by saying that my background is in fish. So I'm an ecologist, and I have expertise in human-centered design and systems change, not finance. Lara, thankfully, however, does have expertise in the world of development and finance. And so we are going to present these findings through a dialogue between the two of us, where I will be asking a lot of questions, and Laura will be very patiently providing some responses. And this is really how a lot of our work has been done over the past 2 years. We've been speaking with experts, we've been reading reports and different articles, but we've also been engaging in these conversations, learning from our work in the field at Future of Fish, as well as from the different expertise that's out there to try to develop this framework and now share it with you in this early stage in order to invite your input and your feedback so that we can continue to refine and create and shape something that will really benefit all practitioners in this space. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And as we go through, we are very eager to really engage in discussion. So if you can please use the question and answer, the Q&A function, to chat any questions, place them in the Q&A, and we'll have time at the end to go through and start to answer those questions. Okay. So now, next slide. Before we dive in, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of who we are at Future of Fish and our approach. We're an international nonprofit, and we work to empower resilient ocean communities around the world. And we do this through deep partnerships in countries and through innovative designing innovative solutions with the stakeholders on the ground. So we really work in the co-design space following a human-centered design approach. And we focus on creating data-rich fisheries as one of our end goals. And this is because we believe that better data is not only important for management, but it can provide for greater insight for businesses, as well as we will talk about, it helps to unlock some of that financing by providing the information that is needed by investors and other funders who are looking to support this space. In our work, we're always aimed at creating 3E solutions. So this is greater equity, economic viability, as well as environmental sustainability. And we do this by taking a systems approach. So we have created a fishery development model, which is a process and a framework for understanding the complexity of different fishery systems, and looking at the state of those systems and how we can move those different elements forward. And this includes things like the value chain, data and infrastructure, governance, livelihoods, and in particular, financing. So we know that to reach this kind of 3E future state, and we know that that state is possible. There are examples of it. Many of you are advancing incredible solutions out there. But in order to reach that on a global scale for small scale fisheries, we know takes resources, and those resources take financing. And so a big piece of our FDM work and a core focus of Future of Fish over the past few years has been trying to figure out, how do we design these strategies and put innovations in place and do so in a way that can unlock and tap into a greater pool of resources than is just provided through typical grant or philanthropic-based funds and even just development funds. We believe that to really achieve this global scale transformation is going to require tapping into those larger pools of capital that exist more in the commercial and private investor worlds. So that's what brings us to one of the first questions we have. And when Laura came on board, I was so excited because we'd been working in this space, and I was ready to say, okay, great, let's tap in here. But one of the first things she helped educate me in is that this is actually, it's really difficult to get finance to flow into small scale fisheries. So Laura, from the top, why is this so hard? Why is this such an enormous challenge for us?
Thank you, Mara. Thanks for all the presentation, introduction, and happy Oceans Day to everybody. So it's hard when we talk about reimbursable finance, no, finance that seeks returns, no. So as everybody I think knows in our sector, there are like a lot of gaps that we need to close, no, and those gaps are related to lack of secure tenure or lack of governance and lack of pipeline, no. All of these type of themes or gaps, it translates in risks, and the lack of finance is related to that risk management, no, the risk management that is needed, no? And that implies to talk about how to put the enabling conditions in place before thinking about investments, no, investments that seek return, that or bring private capital or commercial capital to the game, no. As we highlight, is there is no standalone solutions. It would depend on the type of project and the needs of the project, the needs that need to be covered, and per the needs to be covered, we need to match what are the funders, the funders or the financial owners needs to know. So how we close gaps first, and that match those mandates, no, of both projects and funders. And it's about having investable entities and do that risk management.
Right. So what I'm hearing is there's this, first of all, the funders have their different risks and the different needs that they have, but then there's also these like critical gaps where before we can even get up to that space. So it sounds complicated, and I know it's taken me a while to wrap my head around this, but one of the things you were saying is that we can actually learn from some other sectors, and that there are some models and approaches out there that are starting to figure out how to close these gaps and how to do this matchmaking. And you introduced me to two terms. One was this landscape management. Sorry, it keeps going the wrong way. There we go. Landscape management. And the other is blended finance. And so these are phrases that now I'm starting to become familiar with, but were completely foreign to me going in here. So I was thinking, let's start with the landscape management, integrated landscape management. What is it, and where does it have a role here?
Well, in the landscape, no, landscape refers to interconnected socio-ecological ecosystems. No, here we are talking about the systems or our seascape. No, and landscape management, what it calls, is about involving partners or stakeholders in a long-term vision and long-term collaboration in order to fulfill the goals of within that system. No, so it's about working together, aligning a common goal, not changing our goals, but aligning the goals of the different stakeholders in the system in order to do a better landscape management. No, so that it means to, and it's very much related to the triple impact approach or to systems thinking, because it makes you think about the whole landscape and how the pieces are related to each other. No, and when we talk about finance, it talks also about how we unlock the finance that looks for different goals or impacts within the landscape. No, that would be like a high level definition.
Yeah.
Although there is a lot of literature about this, and the FAO, and there are many players, no, mainly in agriculture, they're working a lot with this approach.
Yeah. So, and I love this idea that we can call it a seascape, right? Landscape, seascape. But one of the things that struck me when we first started to talk about this is that this definition, this concept, it starts with this idea of long-term collaboration. So I know there was a couple of reports out recently that you've been sharing that really talk about the sort of what are reasonable expectations here. So what is a long-term collaboration if you're talking about landscape management and some of these agricultural sectors? Like, how big are these projects in terms of the timeline? So as folks are starting to think about doing this work in a seascape format, what kind of time period are we talking about?
Well, when we talk, no, much more than that. I would say that even more than 10 or 20 years, no? And actually the impact investing movement is starting to embrace this approach and creating bigger or larger investments, no? Within the long term, within the term. And this is what is important, is also not only for the investment projects, but also for the development projects or the donors or the grant buckets, when we seek that buckets, that also need to change this mindset, no, in looking for that long-term projects, because these donors are traditionally like between 1 year and 3 years, no, are the terms of that type of grants. And should need, in order to create this type of partnerships and long-term visions, it requires also that long-term approach within the project, within the strategy that is conceived, no, for the landscape management.
Yeah, and I'm sure for many folks who are listening, this makes sense. They've been engaged in a single fishery or doing this work on the ground for 10, 20 years. They get it, but it does seem to be a mind shift that needs to happen in terms of thinking about entering in these systems, working with the funding community to really make that clear and to set those expectations, as well as with other stakeholders, so that folks realize that this is really a decadal thing.
Actually, Mara, is also very important for the risk management, no? Because we started the conversation about talking about like bringing money is about also managing risks, no? So this having this mindset of the long-term vision of an alignment of the stakeholders within that long-term vision, it also speaks about the risk management, no? So because the investors can see like what is the horizon, what are like the expected results within that horizon, no?
Right.
So that is when we talk about conservation or restoration of ecosystems, we need that type of long-term view. But also when we talk about behavioral change or social development. No, we need also that long-term view, because things are not done in 1 year to another.
We are creatures of habit, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes,
it's true.
kind of.
Well, I also like how you were in this definition too. There's this concept of there's alignment, but it isn't about everyone having the exact same shared goal, right? Like part of it is to solve for multiple objectives. So can you say a little bit more about that piece? Because I think that is also a little bit different. Like there's an importance of having a vision so that folks know that we're all moving towards that same kind of North Star, if you will, but there's also specific goals that different stakeholders may have depending on how they're coming into the system, right? And so how does that piece work?
Yeah, if we talk about a regular seascape, we would think about tourism, we would think about fisheries, we would think about communities, no? So within all of that, and more now that the boom of the blue economy, no, and actually today's agenda of to Between Our event is about these different topics, no? So it's about how these different topics that are part of the seascape, how they are interrelated, no, each other, and how like the different type of livelihoods that these communities can have or can reach, no, and right. So the type of investors that you need to unlock, or to the doors that you need to knock, are need to speak about those goals. No, maybe we are talking about social impact for one, and we are talking about tourism development or fisheries or traceability, no, in fisheries. But how all of these builds within the same seascape, that we are building that vision that is common to everybody, because everybody is in the ground, and the funders and the implementers want and have the same goal, and understanding the interrelations, no, of the different aspects.
Okay, so shared vision and alignment, but different objectives can be met and designed for, so that each actor can really reach the goals that it's most interested in or are relevant to its core mission.
Yeah.
So that to me was also that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think, well, how I think it is we talk about our fishery system, but also with our neighbors, no, the neighbors within the same seascape, no. So think how to relate to the tourism initiatives or other like social development initiatives, maybe financial education or other types of things.
Right.
And how to
right.
work together.
Yeah, so it's thinking a little bit more broadly about who and what may be involved in the fisheries work. It's not just necessarily fisheries, and I know we'll return to this concept because it took me a little while to get my head around how that can all work. But before we dive in deeper here, I did want to also go to this next concept, this idea of blended finance, because I think we are hearing this more and more. Especially within the sustainable seafood space. We know that there's a lot of these, again, these impact investment funds. There's more interest in investment in the oceans, and especially, as you noted, blue economy. And so this idea of private capital coming in is out there, but then folks keep talking about blended finance, that it's not just, one kind. So what does this mean? How does this all work?
Well, there are many definitions out there, and since this is like also a trendy word, and is primarily like promoted by the development banks and big financial institutions too, and the OECD. So blended finance is a structuring approach. It's not a specific instrument. It's not a specific solution. It's how to structure things. No, it's a structured approach that combines public and private funds, and this with the objective of reducing risks, of course looking for return. We are speaking here about projects that have a return. So we are bringing private investors or commercial investors that seek return, and this is very important. No? So to let them in, what the blended finance approach, what it is about how the instruments are combined, or the sources of finance are combined in order to reduce risks, allow more private investors come in, and increase impact. This is about changing the mindset of the impact investing. You know that is changing the mindset from return and risk, and we are talking now about return, risk, and impact. So it's more about talking about that and how bring more money into the system. And it's all the impact investors are out there and are willing to invest in the blue economy space, not only in small scale fisheries, and more there is more interest. No, but this type of approaches are gonna allow this private capital to get into the more risky projects. No, because right now these big buckets. Because this risk management are the sizes of the deals, because when we talk about the small scale fisheries are that is one of the other gaps, no, that sometimes are very small and they are not big enough to cover the costs of these investments. No, so this impact investing firms, what are doing, are looking more for anchor firms or other type of actors where they can bring the money in. No? But this can be done, or combining instruments too, through to creating special vehicles or a special type of approaches or for investment, or within the same project, no, and combining those instruments within the same project to flow the money.
So you're gonna laugh because I this is a question I asked you, but I'm going to ask it again here for anyone who's not familiar. When you use the word instrument, I think of like saxophones and trumpets. So what can you give an example and just help folks, because it is kind of, I mean, that orchestra analogy sort of holds in that you are combining these different types of financial instruments. But what does that look like if you were to give just an example or two?
Yeah, financial instrument is a product, no? It's a type of a contract that is used to channel the finance, no? So we are talking, and it speaks also about the conditions, no? So when we talk about instruments, we talk about credit or long-term credit and loans. We talk about guarantees, first losses. We talk about equity investments or mezzanine debt. So we are talking about the different types of contracts that are there to flow the money, no? So within blended finance, we speak that these blended finance schemes or approaches can be done within a vehicle or a fund, no, where the funds that raise, when they say no, this fund is raising capital in order to invest in startups or whatever, no? So that fund, if it is structured under a blended finance approach, has different tranches of risks. So the most risky tranches are like the ones that are covered by the public finance, and the higher, less risk and higher return ones are the ones that are going to be expected to be covered by the private funders, no, the private investors. So in that way, with the little, amount of money from the public side, it can be leveraged all the private money, no? So this is how they create. The fund managers create their funds or vehicles. When they talk about vehicles, can have also that type of structures, no? But we can also talk about that within a project, like the project finance of all, like when they. Like when people finance the construction of bridges, no, or these big constructions that have project finance, that it can be also structured in combination of different instruments or within the phases of the project, no. So it's different types of doing blended finance.
Okay, so there's different ways of doing blended finance, but overall, the idea is that you have public funders who are able to take on more risk, and that could be philanthropic, family foundations, grants, or the government, who are able to say, if we don't get this money back, or we only get a little bit back, that's okay. And they can take on the riskier part of the work. And then that makes it more attractive and able for private investors to come in and say, okay, well, we'll now take and bring in more money to this less risky part with greater chance that we're going to make that return. So It's just about matching those. Okay. It's still sinking in, but it's starting to get there. So these are the two elements really that we've been working with, and that sort of underlie this new framework that we've started to develop. And we've been calling this a working finance framework, but really we also kind of internally have referred to it as a checklist, because it's sort of a guide of all the different components that a practitioner or program stakeholders need to be thinking about, not only to think about how to create transformation, but specifically to create the finance strategy that can accompany that transformation, right? To be able to know that some of this transformation work is set up and designed in a way that it can unlock some of this private capital. So I'm super excited for you to give us an overview here of kind of what this looks like, and sort of how it's pulling from some of this landscape and blended finance pieces. So yeah, can you walk us through our checklist, which is deceptively simple looking?
Yes. Well, this framework is conceived in order to like doing this checklist in order to understand what type of a strategy you could pursue depending on what are your needs, no? And so it's not, we are not going to talk about those instruments at the very beginning, no? But what this framework checklist, what this framework does is to work you to think about different aspects in order to build that strategy, and then understand what type of money to look for, no? And this, well, that we particularly started thinking about this within the FIPS that are particularly complex projects, no, that have different actors and needs in terms of finance, both that is non-returnable finance and also grant money, and also return investments. No? So how we build it is the framework itself. It has three aspects, the levels of engagement, the phases of investment, and the landscape levers. But what we recommend is, first of all, before thinking about the framework, go to a previous step and think about your system, map your system and understand very well what is the maturity status of the fishery that you're working on and the needs within that landscape, within that seascape, and particularly the communities that we work with.
Right. So mapping the system. This is something that, like you said, has come out of kind of that preliminary step that needs to happen before you can even think about building your strategy. And we've been doing system mapping in Future Fish for a while now through the FDM. But really, this is thinking about mapping not only to understand the system from that lens of the maturity state of, again, these kind of different components that we often think about: governance, value chain, livelihoods, but it's really thinking about it again through this investor lens, this ability to unlock investment. So when we had these discussions, you sort of kind of helped to articulate these three subcomponents. So can you walk us through what these are, and in particular why they're important again for that as conditions to unlock investment?
Yeah, and actually I was remembering that moment, when I arrived to Future of Fish, and my role was like no, let's bring finance, let's bring investment to this small scale fisheries and SMEs. And it's like, okay, but what are those SMEs? Oh no, they are not there yet. And it was like, okay, so maybe we have to think about a previous step.
Right?
About
Can't
the
the money just come first?
No. So it's like about that is like what is the maturity, no? And this speak to the very first slides, no, that we were speaking about the risk management and those enabling the conditions, the base conditions that should be there, and that can enabling actually the sustainability of the small scale fishery within the future, no? So we talk about three elements. One is the fishery system enablers. There are these very basic conditions when we talk about the governance of the fishery, no, or the tenure of securing the tenure, no, of the quotas, no. So having all these elements that are critical for the risk management of the fishery itself. So are those system enablers there? That's the first question, and we can we have a list of these ones, of course, and we can talk later more about them. The next question is like is about, and now we go more to the seascape lens, no? What are those drivers for engagement and creating impact? No, when think about the whole seascape and not only your value chain or the businesses or the small scale fisheries that we are working with. So it's about thinking about the business health of these enterprises or small or medium or micro enterprises, but it's also about the community health, how the community are doing, what are the livelihoods, alternative livelihoods, are socioeconomic development, but it's also about perhaps quality improvements that they can do for better engagement within the markets and having access to better returns, no?
Right.
Or
and there's sorry, I was just going to say, and there's some, again, I'm sure many folks are familiar, there's organizations out there that are really working to develop tools and resources in this space, so in terms of being able to understand the health of an enterprise, within a small scale fishery, as well as community health. Blue Ventures does a lot of this work too. So these are definitely, I just want to call out and acknowledge that, many organizations out there are looking at some of these drivers for engagement and impact in particular. And so that mapping, there are tools and things available that can help organizations to do that, that kind of background work. And many folks, I'm sure on the call, are already doing some of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and this is particularly important when for the next steps in the checklist, no, within the framework and how to work together, no. So the third element of this mapping the system is about the requirements for investable projects. No? So if we are seeking investment, we need to talk about that investable entities that are, and this is about the typical due diligence that an entity has to pass in order to receive money that is investment, no, or long-term loans or capital or equity, no. So to make sure, we need to make sure, like, what is the maturity of this or our own entity or the strategy or the entities that we want to help to receive that investment, no.
Okay, and again, this is the mapping, so it's not necessarily saying that all these things have to be in place. It's knowing whether they're in place or not, and if they're not, knowing then that kind of gets us to that next step, right?
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
So we map, and now we enter into, once you know what you're dealing with, now you start to think about how you would build your strategy. And so this first piece, this levels of engagement, this to me was one of the most exciting insights that you helped bring, especially with the seascape approach. And so I'm super excited for you to walk us through this, because I do think this is where the framework really helps, and especially the checklist helps practitioners to think a little bit bigger and differently about how they are positioning their small scale fisheries programs and work, and what that entails. So here we go. Levels of engagement. What are the levels of engagement, and yeah, how does this all fit together?
So this again, no, this framework makes us think about the different pieces, no, how we need to think about our strategy, you know. So this first one is levels of engagement is about thinking. Well, we are proposing 3 levels, no? The umbrella level, or the program level in our case, when we started this approach, is within the FIP management level, and the pilot or the proof of concept level, no? And this speaks about this seascape approach, and speaks about the how to work more in collaboration, no? But also how to prove concepts in order to unlock capital, no? So the umbrella level is within our system, is thinking about how we approach like the higher structures that are on top. So this is about governments, this is about international programs or platforms that are out there that can help us, no? And this is particularly important with all the momentum that is happening in the ocean space and the blue economy space, no? As you know, with all the climate change, all the governments signed, the governments that signed the Paris Agreement they are actually reviewing right now the national determined contributions, no? And within those strategies, they are doing commitments for climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies, and within those strategies comes. They are allowing us to come like the objectives within the ocean, or the mangroves, or the different type of actions, no? So this also can on top some, if we align and to those programs or strategies or public policies, we can like flow the money better, and closing the gaps from the top to the communities and down, no?
And the SDGs are another example of that, right? Like it's where there are these big national level initiatives or strategies. What the umbrella level is saying is, for those working in small scale fisheries, the goal is to say, hey, we're the place where you can be reaching your commitments. Come bring those resources and apply them through our programs, so that you can reach your, we have gender equity as part of our program level work. You can reach some of your gender equity SDG goals, but do it here in this small scale fishery. So it's, to me, it was that shift of saying, let's make, and this is why we need the global community, right? We need all of you listening, because the idea is to say, let's get small scale fisheries to be the place, to be the most exciting sector where SDG work and climate change commitment works, and these other big initiatives can actually be realized, and to prove that this is the place that we want this to happen. So that's, I'm super excited about that idea, and we need help. And so we're here to talk more about this with all of you. And again, our report, and I don't even know if I said this at the beginning, we do have a report that really provides detail about this framework, and we are happy to share it. We are looking for input. We are looking for feedback, so that we can refine that and continue to make this framework more and more usable, so that the checklist is something that really is applicable for different types of fisheries, and it can be used by practitioners. But this umbrella level, super exciting. And then there's the program level next.
I was gonna finish on the umbrella level. So this is about that alignment that you were mentioning on the goals within these higher programs, but it's particularly important to influence, to build the enabling conditions. Remember that when we were mapping the first one, no, it was like the fishery enabling conditions are there in place, yes or not. If they are not, is that we are not even ready to talk about like return investments. We are talking about big grant money to work, no, within our development money to work within these strategies and to reach these goals. No? Mm-hmm. So the program level is, well, within FIPS is about developing this as you know, the FIP is a multi-stakeholder platform, no? So that is about creating those coordinated efforts within the system, but also at this level is like when we think about like, okay, but how we interrelate or collaborate with our neighbors, other FIP managers within the same region in order to work together to do this unlocking our efforts and more like lobby work in that terms, no, within the umbrella level. But it can be also at a program level or within your strategy, if you are I don't know, a business incubator that you want to work within the seascape system, it's about thinking the different parts of the seascape and how to interrelate with each other, no, and do this together, working these common strategies, common goals, and reaching that umbrella level together, no. So it's about that.
And again, we have FIPS here because this is where we were in the field, trialing some of these things and gaining input, but the FIPS can be replaced by a fishery or a group of fisheries or a community. It's not specific to FIPS, right? Like the framework is very flexible in that way, right? Yeah,
exactly. It's more where your strategy and your stakeholders are coming and stick each other, no, and work together, and to work in with from that core, how to work within the umbrella level and with the pilot level, no? And I particularly like this. You were excited about the umbrella, I'm particularly excited about the pilot level or the proof of concept.
I like the pilots, no? Too. Yeah. Well, tell us about the pilots.
So the pilots is about executing projects to prove concepts. And of course, that can be replicable and reach a scale in the future, but also to explain to our stakeholders and explain to our funders that these things can be done and how we can reduce that risk, no? And how we manage also around the different stakeholders that we were talking before at the program level, no? So in a pilot, in a project, you can have different pilots and check how everything works together, and it's like it's a catalytic tool that can really unlock funds in the future, no? So here is more the risk. The more risky part should happen within these pilot levels. The most risky investments, but are critical in order to unlock funds in the future or investment money.
And I remember in some of our conversations, we say proof of concepts, which often relates to things like showing that a new technology can work well, or a new business model actually has teeth in the marketplace. And so in some ways it's also like proving the business case, right? So it's showing that certain strategies really can work, that if you put, for example, traceability in place and you provide story with a product, that there are markets that are interested in that product and that would want to create new demand and be able to move that product through potentially better channels, premium market channels, something like that. So it's doing it at a small scale to prove that there's really a there, and then you can start to build that out. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. A small scale and in a controlled space within the stakeholders of the program.
Right. So right. It's also it also, as we've been experimenting a little bit in some of the places where we work, it's also that way of building trust, right? Again, because these are large programs. And so it's where a smaller group of stakeholders can get together, work together, start to build that trust, and then they can help kind of be the champions to start to pull in others and spread the word that this work has value and is meaningful. And so, yeah, I agree that I think the pilots are a really important piece. And again, lots of folks listening today, use pilots in their work, but the idea of thinking strategically about what a pilot is that not only can prove a concept or can prove again, something like a new tech or a research result, but really are proving also in some cases a business case is another piece here that helps with the finance side.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. So three levels of engagement. That's just part one.
Yes.
So we'll keep moving ahead. So levels of engagement and then phases of investment. So this one's really important. And this one is where, again, I was so excited and came running, like you said, and I was like, hey, there's all these impact funds interested in oceans. Like, let's get some money to flow. Laura, how do we do it? You were like, whoa, hang on. Let's do some 101 on how this all works. So take us through.
Yeah, so this is simple. It's about, we have the two phases normally when we talk about investment. No, it's the readiness phase when we put the things in order to receive investment that seek a return. So we have the return phase. No, but within these two, what we distinguish is like the step process of a project. No. So it's the preparation and implementation normally are in that readiness phase. Even the implementation, at the end of the implementation phase, it can have also some return investments already, but more concessional or like with high risk but slow return investments. And the return phase that is seeking the step of the project is about the scale and growth and is seeking returns. No, so if we think about our project, we map the system. If we are lacking a lot of enabling conditions, a lot of fishery enabling conditions, we are in a readiness phase, and we need to work within that preparation or implementation, depending on where we are. No, here we talk about that changes in the regulation. We can talk about that if it is the preparation and look for more grant money or public program management for that. But we can also talk about traditional projects of capacity building or like enabling those type of conditions within the organizations. Know how they are organized. Do they have an accounting system? Do they have a governance structure? No, so it's about those type of things that need to happen before even think about bringing returnable investments. No, so it's about lowering those risks again, and in the return phase,
No, I was going to say, and sort of from my end, lowering expectations on where, how mature a system does need to be. There's a lot of work that has to happen in this readiness phase. And that's why that mapping is so important, is to be able to really know where the different projects, entities, and initiatives sit, so that you can then be going after the right kind of capital to support that work. And thinking about, okay, well, if we want to get to the return phase, how do we do implementation in a way that's going to de-risk enough that we can then get over there?
Exactly. Yeah, and this speaks also with the depending on the on your, of course, on the status of your system, no, the maturity of your system, and what is your strategy to close those gaps that you, or your business model that you want to pursue. You now can think about, like, okay, what is my phase of investment? Maybe you have different pieces that are ones that are more in the readiness phase, and some others that can move faster, no? And also you can think about those levels, no, and how where to work at the for now in the readiness phase, and the readiness phase is more about working with the umbrella level or sitting all those coordinations and multi-stakeholder partnerships. And that readiness phase, it can be in the implementation, can be those pilots or proof of concepts, but that can be also done within the return phase. You can still do pilots within your business models, no, in order to keep improving. Or if, for instance, if we talk about value-added products, no, or other type, how to access new markets, no.
So within the strategy and within the system, it's okay. Then I'm hearing that you can actually have different projects at different phases of investment, and at these different levels, and part of the finance strategy you're building is mapping all of those things out and being able to push each one forward in an appropriate way, given what phase of investment, given what level. So it's okay to have, like, it's not that you have just one one.
It's okay. It's complex. It's complex, but it's okay if you are talking about a FIP that is a multi-stakeholder platform, that it has different type of legs, let's say, but you need to think about the whole project, the whole strategy, and also how those pieces are interrelated to each other, but also how mature they are, in order to check if you can like unlock some investments of the return phase or not. No, so it depends on the strategy itself and the situation.
So again, really, really flexible. And what this checklist is helping us do is just set up what are all the parts you've got to think through. And so one of the things with the phases of investment is, when you're thinking about these levels of engagement and different types of projects at those levels, what phase of investment do those kind of projects fall into? You know, readiness phase versus return phase. And what I heard, and I just wanted to hear, is like that umbrella level, which does tend to be public financing. You know, it's again, the SDGs, national determined contributions for the climate change. Those would fall kind of in readiness phase, you're saying, like, so you can create projects.
That is more exactly. Is more in the readiness phase, when it's like full grant money, or to build those enabling conditions. Again, if we are talking about the governance of the fishery, we're talking about that readiness phase, no? But also it can be useful for the return phase when we talk about the blended finance approaches, no? So if we talk about like bringing private investors, building a facility, no, for like building a revolving fund for giving money, or giving like flowing that money for working capital or asset investments of micro or small entrepreneurs, no, of the fishery. So that facility is in the return phase. We already passed through the preparation and implementation. We are seeking of that private money, but we can use that public money from the umbrella level to reduce those risks, no? And combine the efforts.
Okay, so again, that's why that umbrella level is so important, in the sense that, one, it can help. We know for a lot of small scale fisheries, there are a lot of enabling conditions that are not in place, and so it can help close that gap, and it can also help de-risk and make more, kind of crowd in. That's a new term I got from you, right? Attract the private capital by, like, in these sort of vehicles or facilities, as you describe them, that can combine those funds through like a blended finance approach. So exactly. That starts to make sense, and hopefully starts to help show how these different components of the framework kind of build off each other. For time's sake, I'm going to keep us moving along. So we've got 2 of the 3. So the last one, we went through levels of engagement, phases of investment, and then there's these landscape levers. And this to me is really a critical piece, but probably not the most intuitive when we started to, for me at least, when we started to talk about this. So this is a table from our report that really helped it click for me, and kind of goes back to that definition from the landscape management of like multiple objectives. There's overall alignment and a shared vision, but multiple objectives. But can you help walk us through like what is meant by landscape levers and kind of how that fits in to this framework that we've been walking through.
Yeah, this speaks about when we did the mapping. The second step was about the drivers, no, and then the enablers and drivers, no, and it's about that how we see the other elements of our seascape, or elements that can be attractive for everybody, no, drivers for change, and those drivers for change happen also for the funders, no? And so it's about matching this level, these levers is about matching the needs within our landscape or within our strategy, but thinking in our landscape to match the funders' mandates. So it's within, of course, a fishery. We talk normally with a fishery. We think about the value chain itself. That we are talking about business acumen. We're talking about economy development. We are talking about financial management. No, this type of skills and goals. No, within the economic goals. No, the returns for the fishery. So that type of strategy or that type of work can be particularly interested to a type of funders. And normally we've listed there like the generic names now of development institutions, governments, foundations, but within those, there are like particularly ones that seek this particular challenge, no, financial management of enterprises that are led by women within the blue economy space, no? So it can be one. Then of course all that is related to conservation, restoration of ecosystems, and even like payments for ecosystem services. No, this type of categories within our like landscape that can be particularly attractive to types of funders. No, within this is about approaching to these institutions, or even to build new solutions, no, like how to develop a platform to access to the carbon market credits, no, that type of solutions that can be done within. That is when we think about the umbrella level again, no, on the other levels. So these are type of I don't know. Well, and we list the categories: fisheries and ecosystem of nature, livelihoods and well-being, that is more related to the social development, economy and business acumen, more related to the value chain, and innovations and partnerships, more related to the all the innovation also that is happening around the blue economy space, but also within the pieces on the data technology and the how to channel that finance, no?
And what I like about this table, and I know it's too much text for a slide. So again, this resource is available, and we're happy to share the report for those who want to dive deeper, hoping that you'll also provide us with feedback. But I know that as we were, for example, in some of our work in Peru, as we were looking, we were really focused on, I would say, more kind of the economy and business acumen piece. We were looking at quality improvements, kind of very supply chain focused. And then we sort of wound up having to shift that strategy a little bit, or add to it, I would say, kind of blow it up a bit. And that was, part of where some of the learnings around this framework came from. So I was wondering, could you share a little bit about, how we've gotten into some more of this like financial inclusion and gender equity piece in some of the work that we're trying to move forward in Peru, because I think it's a nice example of how this kind of comes into play.
Yeah, actually, that is it speaks on that anecdote that when we started to work in Peru, now it's like, okay, let's go out there to bring in investments. Now it's like, okay, let's stop. What is our maturity of our what is our phase and with the communities that we are working with are more in the readiness phase, no? But then the second question is like, what we want, what are the targets of that finance, no? What within the community, what what are the needs and the risks, and what we want to promote, no? So that's when we came within 3 targets within the strategy, and we consider one about the the household level, no, and how engage more the women and youth in the financial management, and starting by financial education, the financial inclusion, or even savings management within the household, and also aiming as a first step for them to engage more in the management of the fishery in the future, no, within the community enterprises. Then we spoke our target, have a next target that is about the enterprises themselves, the SMEs, and the cooperatives or associations, no, and what are the specific needs of finance that they need, no, and we have been working a lot on understanding what are the cash flows, no, and the investment needs, and how to take them out, help them to be out of the dependence of intermediaries and informal finance, no. And the last target is about anchor firms, no, how to engage with those anchor firms that can really advance in those drivers within the value chain, no, and use them to leverage that money to the communities, no?
To the communities, because they can serve as like a throughput, because they are more sophisticated. These anchor firms have the ability, they could be investable entities, while we're building up some of the other the SMEs, in terms of the cooperatives and things that need more of those enabling conditions. Yeah, exactly. And so it's complicated, because now we have, like you said, there's 3 targets for investment, and they actually have different funders interested, because there are different objectives and different impacts that are being created through that work, but that it all then can kind of come together and be leveraged to move the whole system forward again. So the whole seascape. So I think that's a really nice example. So, okay. I want to, it's been almost an hour of us chatting away, and want to make sure we get to some questions. Hopefully they're coming in. But, this has all been sort of the way that we've mapped the system, so we know our gaps, and then we've explained kind of these 3 elements that we recommend folks think through, right? So to build your strategy, you go through the mapping and understanding the maturity levels, and you look for what investment phases are appropriate for the different kinds of activities, initiatives, and enterprises in the space. You think about levels of engagement, and you think about the levers in the seascape. Then you have to actually build the finance strategy, right? So this is where then all those pieces and the kind of the conceptualization that's happened, the work that's been done to think through these things, now comes into creating a plan. And I know we're not going to get into the details of a specific plan today. We can do that if folks are asking about it. So, let us know. We do have a few specifics, but again, the framework, this checklist is really meant to be very broad and very flexible, because these specific strategies, the types of instruments, right, that's going to vary every single time in terms of the context. So with that in mind, there was 2 more things that we kind of wanted to share in terms of, as you actually move to building your roadmap and your strategy. And so the first was to be thinking about the different types of capital that really can come in a little bit more specific way. We just had that list in terms of the levers of the types of funders, and we've talked about phases of investment, but can you help us just kind of, I liked how you put together this figure again, around just sort of at a very high level, how these different pieces fall into place, so that folks can be thinking about it in terms of their own fisheries context.
As all the work that we have done with the framework, all that thinking about the mapping the system, and then the thinking on the framework is about understanding where we are, no? and what is the risk that we have, and can we actually go and ask for investment money? maybe not. Maybe we need to focus in some sort of strategies that are in the left side of this slide, that are more focused in the grant money, primary public and also philanthropic, but primarily public, in order to enabling those conditions. So these are like what we call about the enabling investments, no? So it's set the foundations and those drivers for impact, that capacity that needs to be in place before we think about the next stages. No, these are like high risk and very low return or zero return. No, so that when we talk in the mapping or the ranges of types of capital, this is like the most like the grant and public money. So then as we move to the right, we are gonna look for less risk and more return, no? And in the opposite side is where we have the impact investing, and in the right side, all the commercial investment and private capital, no? That is the one that seeks more return. No? In the middle, we have first the impact investors, then the venture capital, but it's all these terms that I don't want to bring here because it
so different. They're all the private return seeking investors, but even within that category, they have different levels of risk.
It depends on the levels of risk and the return that they seek. So it's all about that. So that is where that type of money, and in the middle we have this, and that's where the blended finance part is, no? And it's like how we combine these two. So is this like the pink side, no? Is the grants, seed, the catalytic money, and guarantees that are like mainly public, philanthropic, and also private that has like lower risk, no? Lower return, or but wants to have that risk. No, this is like in the words in impact investment is more like the venture philanthropy, corporate venturing, this type of money that can come to cover that catalytic role and grant money. No, so this is like concessional capital that can work both in the enabling investments, but also in the return-seek investments that are the operation and assets investment that are in the right, no, that have this long-term view, are productive and seek that return. No, so we have here the two phases at the end, no, and depending on the phase, we seek one type of capital depending on the type of the goals that we are seeking within our strategy. We touch one lever of the landscape or another to match the type of funder with their mandate,
right?
No, our goal with the mandate of the funder, and we seek within our strategy in the umbrella level and the program level and that. So if we are more in the left side, we are going to speak more on the umbrella level and high risk pilots. But if we or coordinations within our program level, not setting up those things, so
structures.
That is grant money. And if we go to if we are in a more mature phase within the system, we move to the right and we are talking about investments in cooperatives, revolving funds to the SMEs. We are talking about that concessional capital or even equity investments in traceability systems that work together with the small scale fishers, no? In the communities.
Yeah, and I think what you're starting to touch on, actually, we have a nice description for our last slide, which is kind of when I was first hounding you about, well, why can't, there's all these funds, I don't understand, why can't we just they want to help businesses, and you were educating me about, well, their deal size is way bigger than a cooperative can accept, or the risk is too high, or for all these reasons we were stuck. You also kept saying to me, well, what is it that you're looking to finance? What is the financing for? You have to identify and answer that question. And you sort of helped me think about, I really like these categories because, again, they help me think around when we're designing our approach, which have these multiple programs, there's multiple objectives, what is that kind of universe of possibility? And so again, I know that this is just an example. So we want to emphasize, like, this is not a comprehensive list here, but it's just to give folks a sense of the way that the financing, when you do get to that return seeking space, but also the not seeking return space, so grant and philanthropic money, the kinds of things that tend to be funded by these different types. So it would be great if you could just sort of summarize this, and then I think we can move into some questions from folks.
Yes, this is it's about that strategy, you know. And we think at the very beginning we talk about the enabling conditions, yes, but also the investable entities, no. And right. This is about that. It's like, what in your strategy, what is the investable entity, no? Because when we are talking about communities, but they are not investable entities, we are not talking. We can not right. think about that return seek investments, no. So we classify it in these two groups, no? Service providers and businesses that receive directly that capital in order to develop their own business, their own right. their own business plan, or support through the services the businesses of others, no. And so we have this group of potential strategies and or solutions, and on the right side is the integrated finance solutions and vehicles, no. So perhaps the solution that we want to build within our system is about that vehicle that brings the money in order to flow that money to the system, or to the communities, or to the SMEs, no. So here right. is like when we talk about those solutions, digital fintech solutions that can allow digital finance to manage and do microfinance through that digital finance tool. Can be a combination of both. No, it's both. It's if you are like channeling the finance through a vehicle, but also using a startup, a tool, a digital tool in that can charge a fee for that type of work. It's a combination of both strategies. So right. it's kind right. of complex, but at the end, what we want to say on this framework is about like the ways of thinking, how to unlock that capital, and how to build your strategy, you know, and make sure that we have an entity that can receive that capital.
Right, and it sounds and to me.
I would say that this is like a kind of an introduction of finance, but I see this more happening in the conservation world and in the NGOs space, that sometimes we are confused about these things. Now, I guess like this for finance people, or like business or venture capital people, they're thinking about this. This is kind of obvious, no, for them, but it's, right. it's not as obvious within the sector.
Definitely not. And I think especially for those of us who have, again, either come from, you know, community development world, or fisheries, environmental NGO backgrounds, this is all a very different way to think about creating fisheries transformation. And so the hope here, again, isn't that we're necessarily introducing new tools in the sense of having invented, any of these particular, things. It's more about this checklist of saying, here's how you can start as a practitioner in the small scale fisheries space to be thinking about these components, so that you can start to realistically move towards a return-seeking part of your portfolio of work, right? Where that private capital can come in and really help. And again, the report that we've put together, we do have 2 case studies in there of how we're starting to implement this framework, have used this framework in Belize and also in Peru. Again, it's very early stages. And so, to be honest, we were debating on whether or not we should share this at this stage, but we really do think that the checklist is useful. It's helped our teams really think through these things, and we want to continue to refine it and improve it. And so we really would invite your participation in that. And so I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and go to, again, questions in the Q&A. And I can see that Fran, thank you so much. Fran has been helping to bring us questions over from also the YouTube stream. So we are ready and waiting. If anybody has any questions, we'll take a pause. And if not, we can, I have plenty more questions. Anybody? No open questions at this time. All right, give it another few seconds. Feel free to chat to the panelists, or again, you can use the Q&A. One thing that, again, may be beneficial too, because this, this is a lot of content, is the report that we've created, again, is available, and Future Fish, our team is available. So part of what we want to start to do is to engage with the small scale fishery communities, our colleagues. We're happy to have conversations and discuss how we can implement this framework, what kinds of expertise might be beneficial. Again, having someone on our team like Lara, who has awareness of this and can help move some of these projects forward, has been critical. And so we want to be able to provide some of those resources to others, and we're happy to work with you and figure out how we can do that. So we're here to support in your efforts. And again, we learn a lot from hearing where you're stuck, hearing how you're thinking about your own strategies, so that we can continue to refine this model and make sure that it's really meeting and serving as a holistic approach that is flexible enough to accommodate all the variability that we know exists across the small scale fishery landscape. Laura, any other thoughts?
No, I think it was a lot. Actually, it was more than what we expected in time. No?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there are no questions.
Yeah, if there are no questions, we can give the greatest gift of all, which is time back in everybody's busy days. Thank you again to the TBTI leadership and all of your support on the back end. It's really a tremendous platform and opportunity. I know that I have been learning a ton listening in to all of the different talks over this past week. So thank you for arranging this small scale fishery open house and for inviting us to be a part of it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all. Aloha.